Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael and today we're going to be making a smaller batch of sauerkraut and I'm going to be putting in some extra ingredients in mine today, just doing a little experiment with some other things. And I'm going to be making a smaller batch today. So when I'm usually experimenting with the sauerkrauts or any of my fermentations, I use a smaller crock on these, and I've got a 2.5 liter crock here that I've got, and I'll put that link in the description box below if you're interested. And maybe if you want to try getting into fermenting and you've never fermented before, instead of if you want to make a bigger investment and get one of the 5 liter or 10 liter ones, they go up 15, 20, even 30 liter crocks if you want them as big as you can get them. But you just want to try a small batch to see how you might like it and see how it's going to work, and that way you can double, triple, or quadruple the recipe if you want to try something bigger and make a bigger batch of it. But I'm just going to be experimenting today with the smaller crock. And now this harsh pot that I've got here today is just a little bit different from my other ones. My other ones have ceramic weights in it, and this one came with glass weights in it, and I've got everything washed and got them cleaned here. So this one has glass weights in it, so it's a little bit different than the other ones that I've got. They come with ceramic weights when you normally get them. But I actually bought from this company, I bought the glass weights to go in the other two sizes that I've got. These are a lot easier to clean up, and they don't absorb flavors and things in them. So that's what's nice about the glass ones. So this company also has the glass weights that go along with their harsh pots if you want to get those for that also. So moving on to some of our other things that we've got here that we'll be using. I've got a masher here. This is a very large one that I've got. I really like it because it has a larger surface here on the bottom, that when we're getting ready to start pounding down our cabbage to make our kraut, this covers a lot more space. You can get down in it with both hands and take care of that. Then I've got this kind here. This one has a little bit of a texturing on the bottom that when you get into pounding down the cabbage, this one kind of breaks it up a little bit more because all these extra surfaces on here will get down in there and break that up a little bit easier. And then I've got a shorter one here that's got fairly good size base on it here that you can really control for making smaller batches and things. Another item that we'll be using today is a kitchen scale, and there's a lot of variables that can come with it, especially with salts and things, depending on how big the salts are. So I'm going to give you all the measurements today, and we're going to be doing calculations on our kraut so you know exactly how much salt to put in there. And we'll need a kitchen scale, and one preferably that has grams on it. So definitely, if you've got one, break that out, because we're needing our kitchen scale today, because I'll be weighing everything and giving you all the measurements in grams today. So moving into our salts now, there's all kind of different salts on the market out there that you can get. I'm going to be using the pickling and canning salt today. So this has a little bit finer grain to it than maybe your typical sea salt or maybe a pink Himalayan salt. So definitely the only ingredient that you want on your salt is salt. That shouldn't be anything else in here. So if you look at this box here that I've got here, this one has salt, calcium silicate, which is an anti-caking agent. It has dextrose and potassium iodine in it. Any of those things could cause any problem to go with your fermenting, and we definitely don't want that to happen. So only use a salt that has the only ingredient in it is salt. So whatever you want to use is fine, only salt in your ingredient. We'll be using cabbage today, and we'll be measuring that out to let you know how that is. And I've got one jalapeno. I was going to cut that up, make that a little bit smaller dice on that, take the pepper seeds out of it, and I'm not going to put that into my kraut fermentation today. And then I'm going to be using some carrots. This will give a little bit of color if you want to put that in there. These two items are optional. If you just want to use the recipe today and just use the cabbage, definitely do it that way. I thought I'd experiment a little bit today and add a little bit of jalapeno and a little bit of carrot to my sauerkraut that we've got here today. So I believe that's all we've got. I've got a food processor here. This will make your life a lot easier. It has an attachment in it, and I'll take that off. The little blade that comes with it really makes chopping up the cabbage really easy to do. So you just put the blade in there like that, put the top on it, on this particular model that I've got, and then you can drop your quarters of your cabbage down in there and give that a good cut up. Definitely you can use a knife, and we'll use that knife for a little bit of it. So that is another tool that we've got there. I've got some water here. When you're using water with fermentation, make sure that it is dechlorinated. If you want to buy filtered water in the store. I pulled this out of the refrigerator, filtered it, and then I've let it set out for a couple of days to get the chlorine out of it. But you can definitely buy bottled water that is dechlorinated if you want to do that. The chlorination in there might do something. Your fermentation might slow it down or might even prohibit it from doing it. So we want everything to be open so that we can actually get a good fermentation on our kraut. On my harsh pot here, whatever you use, make sure that you wash it out thoroughly with soap and water before you use it. And all these other things here I've washed really well, and so I've got a good clean on those. We don't want to introduce any bacteria, harmful bacteria or any mold into our cabbage, because that could be bad for us. We don't want any mold at all in our kraut when we open that up to check in it. So definitely we'll get started with that today, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do. So we're going to start with our cabbage, and I've got organic cabbage, but if you don't have organic cabbage, just take the outer couple of leaves off of it. We're going to save these because we'll use these down into our harsh pot, and I'm going to do the same thing with this one. So now let's go ahead and start preparing our cabbage. So I'm going to take the head here, and I'm just going to cut it right down the seam here on the back of it and just cut that in half. And then I'm going to take that and cut that down in here and cut it into a quarter. And with that, I'm going to take this rind of it out of here. I'm going to take that and just give that a cut just down the back of it, just like that. And that will free that out. I'm going to give this a little bit of a rinse, and then I'll be right back. I'm going to do that to all of these. So you'll take your cabbage with all of them and just take that little bit of that rind off. And we're going to set that to the side and just give this a little bit of rinse now that we've got this open, and we can go ahead and start cutting it up from there. So I'll be back in just a minute once I've given these a little rinse. All right, I've given my cabbage a good rinse here, and I took the other salt away. That way I won't get it mixed up in my recipe today, because we definitely don't want that other in there. So if you don't have a food processor, you can definitely take a knife and just kind of run it down and cut it however thick that you like it. If you want to cut it, with a knife, you can definitely do that. Just cut it to whatever size you like, and then set it to the side until you get everything cut up. Like I said, I'm going to be using this today, and I'm going to give this a cut one more time down through the middle. Take the top of it off, put that in there just like that. Turn it on. That's a lot easier than having to sit there with a knife and do that. So I'm going to continue to do all of that. If you've got your knife, you can do that. If you've got a mandolin, you can definitely do one of those. Just be careful with those. Those can be really dangerous if you don't use the little attachment on the top of them. So if you've got a mandolin, definitely use one of those too, or your knife, however you want to do it. All right, so I'm going to continue to cut up my cabbage now, and I want to talk about one other thing. I've got a bowl here with just a cloth over the top of it. This is a clean bowl that I washed, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to double step it here, because the scale that I've got, I had another scale that the little front of it would pull off, and I could put any size bowl on it that I could put on the top of it and still be able to read it. This one that I've got here won't be able to do that. So I've got a bowl here. I'm going to put my cabbage in, and I'm going to zero out the bowl, get it back to zero. I'll transfer my cabbage into it, and that way I'll know how much cabbage I'm going to have, and I'm going to measure this in grams. So as I'm cutting it up, I'm just going to put it into my clean bowl there, and then I'll transfer it to this bowl and zero it out, and we'll come up with a total. So I'm going to continue to cut this up. I'm going to transfer it to this bowl. But if you've got a bowl that will sit on your scale without having to do that, then definitely do that, but I'll be back in just a minute. All right, I've got all of my cabbage cut up now. There's a couple of pieces in there that I saw that the processor made a little bit bigger than I wanted in there, and you can just take those out and just kind of give those a rough cut with your knife. Might be a few of those pieces. Just cut them up however you like to, and if you don't really mind, just leave them alone and they'll be fine just like that. So now I've got that done there. I'm going to put the towel back over it just to kind of keep anything out of it, so I'll just kind of keep it a little clean. So I did change out the attachment on my food processor. I've got another attachment here that will grate this carrot up really nicely, and so I've got that in there. So if you've got one of these with those different attachments on it, use those. If you don't, you can use the bigger grates here on the side of a box grater if you like that, or if you want it just a little bit smaller, you can do that. It's completely up to you how you want to do it. I've got a carrot here, and I'm just going to take the outer skin off of it with this little peeler and give it a little rinse, and we will get this ready for the food process. I've given my carrot now a little rinse. I'm going to take the bottom off of it, and the top, I'm going to use the little hole here that's on the top of my food processor, And I'm just going to push it in like that, give it a turn. And that is as easy as that could possibly get. Now with our cabbage, we'll just put that in. That just gives it a nice little bit of color. So you can use as much carrot or as little as you like. Like I say, I normally just make batches that are just the cabbage in them. I thought today I'd try something a little bit differently, and we'll give that a little mix through, and you can see what that looks like. And if you want to add a little bit more, you definitely can. And now let's work on our jalapeno. Now with the jalapeno, I'm definitely going to take the seeds out of it. I don't want that to burn me up on that, because this is just an experiment with a jalapeno today to see what that's going to do. So I'm going to take that and cut that in two, and then cut it into quarters. And then I'm going to take it and run the knife down it. Be careful with that. And just cut that white ribbing out and remove those seeds out of it. Just as easy as that is. That's really easy how that comes out of there, just like that. Start on one end, and then you can work from the other side and just kind of run it down like that. And that'll pull all of those seeds right out of there. And then with the knife, don't get out, you can use your finger and pull them out just like that. Now with this jalapeno, I'm going to make this fairly small. So I'm just going to use my knife here and just give this a nice little cut up. All right, now that we've got them cut like into those, I'm just going to come back through and just give them another little dice up and cut them up really small. All right, now that I've got that diced up just a little bit there, we're going to take that and put that into our mixture. Like I said, this is just a little bit of the pepper in there. I did take the pepper seeds out. I didn't want those in there. I did take those seeds out. But if you want to leave the seeds in, you most certainly can. If you want to use a serrano pepper, those are a little bit more on the hotter side than the jalapenos, and that will give you a little bit more heat on that. So we're just going to kind of give that a mix through just like that. And at this point, I don't know what anything weighs. I hadn't weighed it yet. So we're fixing to determine now how much the weight of our ingredients are that I've got everything in there. So you want to wait till you get everything put in, get it all mixed together, and take a look at it and see, do you want to add any more carrots to it now? Do you want to add any more jalapenos to it? Do you want, if you got another head of cabbage, it's completely up to you how this is going to work out. All right, now that we've got everything cut up now, we've got everything mixed together. I like the consistency and the color that I've got on that. I'm going to take my bowl here. I'm going to turn my scale on. We're going to measure it in grams, make sure it's in grams. I'm going to put the bowl on it, and then I'm going to zero it down. All right, so now we're at 0. And I'm going to add my ingredients to this bowl, and we're going to measure it now to see how many grams of my ingredients I've got. All right, so we've got everything measured now. We've got all of our ingredients in our bowl now, and it says 1,636 grams on it. So I'm going to take a calculator, and I'm going to times that times 2% or 2.25%. So that's what our salt solution is going to be for our cabbage. So we take the weight of this in grams, and then whatever we come up with, 2%, or 2.25, whichever one you want to do with it, we're going to put in 1636 times 0.02, and that's going to be 2%. I'm going to need 32.72 grams, so I'm just going to round that up to 33 grams of salt. And that's what's nice about this, is because whatever coarseness of salt you have doesn't matter, because we're going to be using 33 grams of salt. So I'm going to give my hands a wash, and I'm going to come back and we're going to put that into this bowl, and I'm going to measure me out 33 grams of salt. All right, so let's measure our 33 grams of salt. I've got a little ramekin here, and I'm going to zero that back out, and I'm going to pour out 33 grams of my salt. All right, I've got my 33 grams of my salt here, and I'm going to set my scale to the side. I won't need that here for what the next part we're going to do. And I'm going to bring that back over. And now we're going to move on to the next step. So I'm going to give my hands a little wash. I did wash my scale down, but I want everything to be as clean as I possibly can. So just in case, I'm going to wash my hands. I'll be right back. All right, I've got my hands washed now, and I've got my salt here. And what we're going to do to get this started is we're just going to sprinkle a little bit of the salt across the top of it. And what this is going to do is going to bring out that moisture and that liquid that's inside of that cabbage out. And that's going to create our brine that we'll be using for our ferment today. So we'll just kind of give that a little mix through with your hands. We'll come back and do a little bit more of the salt. Continue to mix through with your hands. And while you're doing that, you want to kind of crush it along a little bit too, just to kind of help it along, get that salt all over that cabbage. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but you can definitely tell just from that little bit there that you can already see the moisture starting to come out onto the cabbage there. It's starting to look a little bit glossy, shiny. For that moisture is coming out, we'll do a little bit more of our salt. All right, that's our 33 grams or our 2%. and just mix it through. All right, I just kind of worked this in for a minute or two just to kind of get it started and to kind of get all that salt incorporated onto that cabbage there. And I can already tell just from doing that that it is going down a little bit. And what we can do, I'm going to go wash my hands in just a second, is we can take our pounder that we've got here and we can go in and give it a little bit more of a crush. So if you want to use your hands, you can continue to do that. If you want to use one of the other tools that you've got here, you can definitely do that. We'll be using these also when we get ready to put our cabbage into our crock, and I'll show you what we're going to do with that. But just while we're doing this here, about every 5 minutes, just come in and give this a little mix through with your hands, or you can use the tool there to pound it down. Also, we want to try to get as much liquid out of here as we can. If we don't get a lot of liquid out of this, I'm going to show you how to make a brine that we'll be able to add to it to get where we need to start our fermentation. So just give this a little mix through. I'm going to go clean my hands off. I'm going to put the towel back on it just to keep anything out of it, and then come back about every 5 minutes and give it a little mix through, maybe 15, 30, 45 minutes, an hour. Depends on if your cabbage was in the refrigerator. It might take a little bit longer for it to release its liquids. If it had been sitting out, then it might be a little bit faster depending on how warm or cold your home is. There's a lot of variables that could do that, so we just want to kind of let it go, and I'll show you what it looks like in just a minute when it gets to the point where I want it. Stick with me. All right, I am back, and my cabbage has been sitting here for about an hour, and I have come in and given it several crunches down with my hands, and I wanted to show you what that looked like. You can see that it has shrunk down quite a bit from where we started with it. So this is a good point where we are here with it now. So now I'm going to set this to the side. I'm going to get out my pot here, and we're going to start packing our pot. Now I've got 2,000 milliliters of water here, which is roughly about half of a gallon, US gallon. And then I've got measured out here 60 grams of my pickling and canning salt. So whatever salt you're using, you want 60 grams. And what that's going to do, you mix it in with your water, and that'll make your brine solution that if we don't have enough brine for our crock here, then we can add a little bit more to it. Now what we want to do once we pack this in here is we want to come in with this tamper, and we're going to pack it down as tight as we can get it in there. And we're going to come up to about here on the jar where it starts curving back in again, because we have to make room for our weights. And you can see here our weights, they're probably about ½ an inch on those. And then you want to be able to let the water solution or the brine solution come up above the weights, an inch or two above that. So that's why we're going to stop fairly low. So we're going to get this packed, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So I'm just going to kind of bring it up here so that we can take a look at it and see. So just grab you some out with some tongs, and we're just going to start dropping it in. All right, now I'm going to take this wooden tamper because it's got a bigger surface on it, and I'm going to put it down into my jar. And you're just going to kind of press it down all the way around until we get a nice flat surface. And this is also going to release some more of that solution out of there. All right, once you get that tamped down, we'll come back in and we're going to put some more of our cabbage in. All right, we'll come back in with our tamper again. And we'll just keep adding it until we get everything packed in our jar. All right, now that I've got everything packed in my jar and all of my liquid that was in the bottom of that, we added that in there. We don't want to throw that out. We want to come in here with a paper towel, and I want to give that a good wipe down to get all of that loose cabbage, it might have come up on the lid here, out of there, because everything needs to be under the solution when you ferment. So if there's anything above solution, you could risk the chance of getting some type of a mold in here, or definitely don't want that to happen, or it could start to try to rot on you. So push everything under the liquid you got, and I'm going to grab a spatula. All right, so I've got a spatula here, and I'm just going to run down the side of it just to see, make sure, because as you're packing that in there, there could be some of the loose cabbage or carrots or whatever other ingredients you got there that could come up on the side of it. And we, like I said, we want everything under the solution. All right, so looking at that, I don't see a lot of liquid that's come above the top of the cabbage there, so you can give it one more press down just to see how it's doing. And it's coming up to the top, but it's not going to cover my weights. So I'm going to go ahead at this point, and that's what we saved this cabbage leaves for. And we're going to go ahead and take a couple of these, and you're going to pack these around the top of it to make sure that it stays flat, and we keep everything under the brine solution there. So I'm just going to cut this bottom half of this off just to kind of flatten it out a little bit. And then I'm going to take that and push that here on the side down into it and move it around so that we get everything submerged. And so by doing that, just push the cabbage leaves down, and that way once the brine solution comes up over the sides, that'll keep it from floating up around the sides of it there. So we'll just take a couple of these and just give it a good pack around, and that way we keep everything submerged under the solution. We don't want anything floating on the top. And if you get air under those leaves, just make sure that you get that out and push that down, because we don't want any air in there at all. We want all of that out of there. I'm actually going to take that and break that into two and just kind of come here on the side where I can see it and pack it around it so that I get all of that submerged under that solution. All right, I've got pretty good on that. I'm just going to take a couple more pieces and run it around here on the edge where I can see some of the exposed cabbage is there. And I'm going to come in with another little piece here on this side because I can see another little spot that I missed on that side. All right, I've got everything covered now. And I don't know if you can see down in there really well with that, but I've got all the surface of it covered because we don't want any floaters on it. And I'm going to put my weights in now on the top, and that's just going to add a little bit more to help it hold everything under the solution. And I'm just going to give that a press and see if I can get any of that. Now that did bring up some of the liquid. I can feel it in my hands, and I think you should be able to see it there where that is. I'm going to let this sit here on the countertop for just a little while longer and see if that releases any more of that liquid out of there. And I'm going to put the lid on it just to make sure. I don't see anything floating, which is good. Everything is under the solution. I'm going to let it sit here for about 30 more minutes and see if it comes up a little bit higher. And if it doesn't, then I'll add some of my solution that I've got there. I'm going to put the top on it just to keep anything out of it. I'll come back and we'll take a look at it. Let it sit here for another 30 minutes to an hour and see what it's going to do. I'll be right back. I am back, and I wanted to check on my brine solution now on my weights, and I can tell by looking at it that it did not produce enough brine to cover the weights. So I did go ahead and add my salt sugar to my water solution here. I'm going to add that to here, and remember, I want to add it to 1 to 2 inches above the weights, and that will give me enough solution. I have done experiments with it where I've made kraut in jars, and the cabbage itself can actually reabsorb the liquid back again and dry it out again. So you definitely don't want that to happen. You want everything to be under the brine solution, and I don't have that with this. So I'm going to add just a little bit more till I get my 1 to 2 inches above the top. And with that, I'm going to do it really slowly because I don't want to disturb everything that's under it. So I'm going to try to hit the little glass weights on it there. It's not going to take much. That just barely covered the glass weights up to the top. And let's do just a little bit more. All right, so I did add about 2 inches to the brine solution. I just want to make sure that I had everything covered. And we want to give it one last look just to make sure I don't have anything floating, and I don't. Everything is submerged. It is looking good. I didn't want to take a chance on it with not getting enough brine solution in there that my cabbage would reabsorb the liquid that it's got in there. So I'm going to put the top on it. I'm going to set it over here on the counter out of the way. And what's nice about these crocks is there's a water reservoir here. And so once the fermentation starts, what it's going to do is it's going to produce a gas on the inside of it, and that gas is going to escape through the lid here. But what we don't want to do is we don't want air to get in it, because air is an enemy for our fermentation because it could cause it to mold. We could get a lot of carm yeast in it. And so we want to keep everything out of it that we possibly can. So just make sure that when you put this away, that you put some of your solution. I've got some of my solution here. I'm just going to put it around the ring here. And you want to check it every day because you'll get evaporation on it just from the normal evaporation in your home. So make sure that does not run dry. And that way you might come in and you might hear the little lid on it making a little rumble noise where the gases are escaping. That's perfectly normal. That's what you want to hear. You want to hear the gases coming out of it. We don't want anything coming in it. And then what I'm going to do different this time is I'm going to come in and check it, and I'll show you what this is. This is a pH tester, and it's got a little probe on it, and we'll stick it down into the solution and see what our pH is for our ferment, and I'll let you know what that should be, and we'll take a look at that. And that way, if you want to pick one of these up, if you want to check on it in 10 days, and if it's where you want it to be, then come back, take it out of the crock, put it into an airtight container, and put it in the refrigerator, and then you can eat on it for several months that way. Just make sure that when you pull the kraut out of it, that you leave the brine solution behind and just repack everything back under the brine solution again. That way it stays nice and covered in the refrigerator. So we'll put this to the side. I'll come back and we'll check on it, and we'll talk about this pH meter in the next time you see me. Stick with me. All right, it has been 3 weeks since we started our sauerkraut process, and I wanted to bring you now where we're going to open it up. I've not opened it up since we started it because I don't want to add any air into it. So I know from making it that it normally takes between 3 to 4 weeks for it to process for me. So a lot of variables could be in that too. If your home is really, really cold where you put it, it could take longer for it to ferment. And if it's a little bit warmer, then it could be a little bit mushy if it's gotten too hot. So I've not opened the lid on this. We're going to see what this looks like today. And again, this has been 3 weeks, and that's normally where I'd like to keep it at. So if there's any air in it, we might be able to see that. I'll push down on the top here and see. We can see that my lid is floating around. It's good. That means I've got some good pressure on the outside. And with the smaller harsh pot, what I noticed is it wanted to try to dry out a lot faster. So every day I'd have to come in once in the morning and then once in the evening and make sure that it had water in it because it was evaporating in here a lot. It might have been because the heat was running. Could have been a lot of different variables in the place too. So definitely with the smaller harsh pot here, yeah, I did have to keep a watch on this to make sure that it did keep the water level in it so that it didn't dry out on me. So that's a little bit different from the bigger one. So if you have one of these smaller ones like that, just keep a check on it. I had to do that twice a day, and I kept it out on the counter over here, and when I go by, I just looked to make sure that it had plenty of water, and if it didn't, I just add a little bit to it to bring it back up again. So now let's open it up, and we're going to test it to see if we've got some good kraut. So when we open this up, there'll be a couple of tests that we'll be able to do to tell if we've got a good batch of kraut or not. So when you open this up, you'll be able to smell if it smells good. So if you've had kraut in the past, you know what it smells like, then this will have the same smell to it as well. So, all right, so I'm going to take one of these paper towels, and I'm going to take the water out of the reservoir just by sticking it down here in the side, and that will absorb that water in there. And before I get ready to open that lid up on that. All right, so let's take a look now at our kraut and see what we got. So we got the lid off of it. I'm going to give it a smell first. That definitely has that sauerkraut smell to it, and all of my liquid is still there. I don't see anything in it. I don't see any mold, which is a plus on that. I don't see any calm yeast, so that's perfect also. All right, so I got a flashlight here, and that's one way to test it, just to see. And you can see I've got a really good batch of kraut here. So now if you've got a pH meter, you can definitely take that. So I'm going to grab my pH meter, and we're going to come back and we're going to see what my pH level is of my kraut. So for fermented food, we want to make sure that it gets below 4.6 on our pH meter. If you want to test it that way, you definitely can. And so if you haven't seen the video on what this looks like, I'll put the link in the description box below where I use this to calibrate it. So I'm going to give it just a second to come up, and you want to make sure this is clean. So I'm going to give this a little bit of a rinse, and we'll come back and we'll give this a test. All right, so I've given that a little bit of a rinse, and we're just going to stick that down into the liquid there and see what we got. And it's coming out at 3.76 on that. So that is below the 4.6 that we were looking at. And if you would leave it in there a little bit longer, you possibly could, and it might come down a little bit more. I could test it in another week, and it might be a little bit lower than that. So definitely we've got the pH level down where it needs to be below that 4.6 on that. So that is a good sign. So I'm going to go ahead and start removing. I'm going to grab me a bowl so I can put these weights and things in, and we'll get that ready to pack. So get you a container that I've got here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get all of that in here. We're going to see, and we're going to keep it packed tight, and I'm going to put it in the refrigerator once we're done. If you've got a big batch of it, and you've got one of the bigger harsh pots, you might want to consider at that point, if you wanted to, you could water bath can it, and that way you'd make it shelf stable. But I'll have this little batch here that I'll be able to put in the refrigerator and I'll be able to eat on it. I'm gonna go ahead and grab me something that I can put these weights in and I'll be right back. All right, I've got my jar clean here and my lid clean on that, and I've got this here, and I'm just gonna go ahead and take these weights out off the top. All right, now that I've got my weights out, I'm gonna go ahead and remove our big pieces of our cabbage leaves on the top. I'm ready to take the kraut now out of the harsh pot. I've got a jar. I hope I've got one big enough here to put this in. We'll see as we start getting this out. What we want to do is, as you're putting it into something else, as you get it ready to put it in the refrigerator, you want to make sure that you've got something big enough that you can pack it in to keep everything below the level there. So when you put your brine back in it, you'll be able to put it in the refrigerator and it will continue to ferment just a little bit. But you want to make sure that you can get it packed down so that the kraut itself will stay under the water level itself of the brine. So let's go ahead and get that started, and we'll see if I've got this jar big enough here to put that in. It's got a nice color to it, as you can see that. And the smell is intoxicating. I love the smell of sauerkraut. Nothing like it. And with this one, I did experiment with it a little bit, and I did put those extra carrots in there and those extra peppers in there. So definitely, if you don't have those, you won't have that type of consistency to it. But we're going to go ahead and pack this in here. And I've got my wooden packer here too that I can use to pack that down in there pretty tight if I'm going to need it. And it looks like it's going to scare it to death filling this up. So just have to experiment with it. I might have to transfer it to a bigger container. That way I can keep all of it in the same container in the refrigerator, because I definitely want to keep all of my brine with my kraut. All right, I'm going to take this packer and I'm just going to push it down in there a little bit. This should free up some of that head space in there so I can get some more in there. All right, that is about as much as I'm going to be able to get into that. I've got just a little bit left in there. I'm going to grab one of the pint jars and I'm going to put the brine in here and fill this all the way up to the top. And then what I've got left over, I want to keep my brine. That way, if I run this down a little bit lower, once you start pulling your kraut out, if you pull some of the juice out with it, you can always put the extra brine you've got into there. So I'm going to go ahead and get me another jar. Once I see how much I've got left, I might be able to eat it all just in one sitting. So I'm going to give it a taster in just a minute. But I'm going to get me another paper towel and I'm going to give this a little wipe down as I pour this brine off into this jar. I'll be right back. I've got all my kraut now in my jar, and it did fill it all the way up to the top here, and I've got my brine in here as well. So remember, don't throw your brine away that you got in here. You want to pack that back into your jar so that you'll be able to keep that in the refrigerator, because even in the refrigerator it's going to continue to ferment until it's all gone. So definitely make sure that you've got your brine in there if you can. And this is what I had left over out of it. So this will be about a pint size worth of brine here that I've got, that as I work my kraut down, I'll be able to put that back in there and keep that submerged. It's just like it is when you've got it in your crock. It will continue to ferment. Just keep it packed down under the liquid in the refrigerator and you'll be fine. So I've got just a little bit here. I thought I would give it a try and see what this tastes like. It still smells wonderful. I just really cannot get over the smell of kraut. I really love it. Let's give this a try. So this sauerkraut is really crispy. It's got a nice crunch to it. I hope you can hear that through the microphone. This is a really good batch of sauerkraut that I've got here. And I hope this beginner's guide to making sauerkraut has helped. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I'll try to answer them the best that I can. And if you like this content, maybe you might consider giving me a thumbs up. It really does help when pushing it out through the YouTube algorithms. I would really appreciate it. And check out one of these other two videos over here on the side. You might find something else you like. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you in my next video. Give this sauerkraut recipe a try. I want to hear from you how yours turned out. I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye now.